Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared create collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face.
So my next conversation was a whole lot of fun. I had the pleasure of not only meeting, but having an in-depth conversation with Aisha, Jamal, about her new film, Kandahr Away, premiering at Hot Docs here in Toronto. You're going to want to see this film for sure. If you don't get out to the theater to see it at Hot Docs, look for it coming soon to a theater near you or perhaps video on demand. It's a delightful film. It's a step into someone's family that you don't often get to see. I mean, it's a real pleasure, a real simple pleasure in its own way, and yet with a whole lot of deeper meaning and questions raised about the way we interact with others, the way we treat others, the way we respect the past, and the way that the way that we view history and how it's connected to today. And this is a film that will, I think, get under your skin and remind you why family is so important, why family relationships need patience, why there's a need for all relationships, really, for an honesty and an openness. And what's so remarkable about this film, it touches on Indigenous issues here in Canada and Afghanistan. It's a film that raises questions about war and about relationships and about meaning and about how we represent that and how we honor that in our own way. It's a fascinating story. It's a fun story. There's a real sense of humor and a comedic edge throughout. And Aisha and I chatted and had a bit of fun around the fact that just maybe we could create a sitcom around her family in some way, shape, or form. And who knows? Maybe somebody's going to get rich beyond their wildest dreams doing that. And one of the things I love about the film too is it really is about passion. It's about commitment, and it's really about being present. So stay tuned. Aisha Jamal talking about her new film, Kandahr Away. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my speaking and my writing. You can also dive deeper with some of the interviews on facetofacelive.ca, and we've got over 400 interviews there now, and it's growing, and my database grows, our Twitter reach grows, and I hope that you will step into it in a new way. Sign up for the email newsletter. If you want to advertise on Face to Face, reach out to us. You can do that. Please share it with your family and friends. Share it with others, people you don't even know. That'd be great too. If you could support us, patreon.com, we would certainly appreciate it. And if you can't do that, just signing up for the newsletter or leaving a quote on iTunes would really be appreciated. A review there would be helpful. It's amazing what little bit of digital engagement can do for our presence online. So please do that. And also rabble.ca. Don't forget a host of other articles and blogs and posts there about things that matter. News for the rest of us. Rabble.ca. Coming right up, Aisha Jamal and her new film, Kandahr Away. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by a very special guest here with us today to talk about her new film, Kandahr Away. We have Aisha Jamal here with us from Hot Docs. I guess I can say that. Aisha, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So is that fair to say, from Hot Docs?
Well, as in, I work there.
Right, yes, but you do a whole lot of things.
My film. Yeah, and my film is at Hot Docs. So
your film is at Hot Docs. That's probably the best way to say it. So you're at a party and somebody says, so tell me more about what you do, Aisha. What would you say?
I probably would say that I am primarily a filmmaker.
Okay.
But that I also teach film and that I also am a film programmer.
And what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it's funny. As film programmer, people always think that you're working with computers as a programmer, but film programmer is a bit more like being a film curator.
Oh, okay.
Which means I program films. I watch way too many films in 1 year, and then I help sort of select the films that will play at the festival.
Do you have any, you know what, that's kind of interesting. Do you have any rules, like you're only allowed to watch 2 a day because you would reach your sort of a fatigue level?
You know what? I wish I could say 2 a day, but I watch about maybe, depending on the length, 10 a day.
Oh, are you serious?
So, yes, we have a very short turnaround window.
Wow.
So, but that's shorts, mediums, and feature length. So I do have a rule where no more than 2 or 3 features in a row, because I
Okay.
need to break it up, and because features usually get into a subject so much heavier that I need time to digest. So I try to make sure that I also give each film its respect. You know, even if it's heavy films, it's very difficult to move on right away.
So would the next job for you potentially be film critic? Would that be another place to go I mean, if you've seen so many films, you must have kind of a pretty interesting lens and almost template of saying, okay, this is going to be great or not so much.
You know, I think I'm a film critic when I teach. I give
Mm,
everybody my opinion on what we just watched. But I think that when it comes to, when I think about what is the difference between a film critic and a film programmer, I always think that as a film programmer, we're so much more supportive of filmmakers' careers. And we really try, in many ways, when people come to the festival with their films, to really champion them. And I think as a film critic, you need a distance from filmmakers because you might not love everything they do, and they're not your friends. They're people whose work you actually have to look at critically and analyze. So I just think my role is so different as a film programmer than if I were to be a film critic. So I don't know how easy it will be to jump from one to the other. Like, I am opinionated. That would be
right,
easy.
right.
But I think changing that role from being the supportive to being the critical might be a bit harder.
Right, right. Well, tell us more about your life as a filmmaker. And what how we wound it up with a Kandahar Away. And by the way, congratulations, a delightful film. I had so
Thank
much
you.
fun watching your family. I felt a little voyeuristic, and it felt a little weird at times, just because it was pretty intimate, and you're in a pretty well, a part of Canada that I certainly didn't know existed. So that's always pretty cool as well, from an awareness perspective. But yeah, tell us a little bit about there's so many places we could go. I want to know if you had everyone sign a document before you started this
Yes,
film.
yes,
Yeah,
I did.
tell me more because what? How many family members? We're 6, 7, maybe 8 family members.
Well, I'm actually from a family of 5 children. So my immediate family is 7, but my sister's husband came along and her son. So in total, we were 9 people
9
traveling.
people. 9 people.
Yeah, I mean, it was my first feature film, and everyone kept saying, it's kind of insane that you have 9 subjects.
Right.
I
Right.
was like, yes, it is. But you know, the film started out when I heard about my family inheritance. My brother told me, sort of in passing, he said, "Do you know that we're inheriting this land in the middle of Saskatchewan from Dad?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And my dad never told me. So I started sort of this conversation with my other family members, and I started to realize that when I repeated that to other people, they thought it was hilarious and that it was absurd. And it made me really think about more about my dad, about my family, about this other Kandahar. And I was like, wow, there's so many themes in here that I want to explore. And that's really what started this idea of making a film. So the film really follows my family on this first trip to see the land. And my dad had been there before, and I had been there on a research trip a couple of times, but nobody else in the family had seen the land. So we all decided together to go on this road trip to Kandahr, Saskatchewan. And we're all born in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So that's kind of the joke, that we're going to this other Kandahar. So we all went on the trip together, and it was kind of fascinating to see everybody's reactions and to have the discussions about what do we do with this land.
There's so many funny moments in the film. I mean, is it a comedy to you? Did you sort of start out? I mean, you probably have looked back on family events over the years, and your dad is quite a character. That is for sure. And I say that with a smile, and a lot of affection. I think what little I know of him, but yeah, did you start out thinking we've got a pretty funny family here? I want to shine some light on this. I want to share this with people.
Yeah, I mean, I did think about the fact that I think everyone in my family is a bit of a character. So in a
Right.
way, I'm the least funny out of the whole bunch. So I just was like, wow, my sisters always have me in stitches. My brother has such a great way of looking at the world that I was like, they would make good characters on screen. And, you know, when I was selling the film, it was also the idea of having to shoot them and show it to people. And, you know, people would react and say, actually, yeah, these are people that I want to hear more from. So I was like, oh, okay, so my instinct was good there. And I did make them sign a form before we shot. And I have resorted to it a couple of times where I was like, hey, you signed a release form.
Did did
So
did did anyone want to say before you put it up on screen before you submit it to a festival, I need to see the final cut, or did you reserve that right?
To be honest, out of ethical reasons, I always think it's good to show your subjects the films that you make, especially in documentary, because these are real people's lives and they're giving you their time and their story. So I was very, very clear that I showed them a few scenes before the film was finished editing. And then I said, once the film is edited, I will show you the film. And I wanted to be very careful and listen to what they had to say to me. But at the same time, you kind of have a double role. Like, I'm a member of this family and my family is not worth sacrificing for a film. But at the same time, I'm a filmmaker and I kind of want to serve the story as well. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I listen to their criticism. And if there's something really like big red flag, I will address it. But if it's just sort of little criticism of I don't like how I look in the shot, then it's kind of like tough luck, suck it up.
Right. It's interesting, Aisha. Any great film to me, especially documentary. We could talk about that, and you're the one teaching, not me. So help me out here. But there's layers. Yeah. There's metaphor. There's symbol. There's conversations. There's people we meet. There's all these different places we could go. And I think one of the things I've loved about how in the last 3 or 4 years on my podcast, I've started focusing more on filmmaker, and it's about the story. It's about the narrative, and then you start out with this idea of where this interview might go, and you wind up in a completely different place. And I think filmmakers, right? And this is what families like. And so a Kandahr away to me was, okay, so here we've got this family, and they're all of a sudden we find out where they're going to Kandahr, but it's Kandahr, Saskatchewan. So there's lots of little surprises and so on. But there's so much more going on than meets the eye. So I guess, to my earlier question, comedy, there's also, it's about family life. This is about relationships and it's about our history. It's about war. It's about racism. And there's a lovely little conversation about language. And I mean, it went places that I didn't think it was going to go. So I guess my point is that the layers are just, it's so wonderful in its simplicity, and isn't that what we live day to day? I mean, here you are, probably one of, and I'm so sorry, everyone who lives in Kandahr, Saskatchewan, but it's not a really exciting place, right?
Well, there's 15 people left.
That's right. 50, and they do. And they do. Do they have a legion? No, they don't have a legion. That's the town that's not too far away, right?
That's the town that's 10 minutes down the road.
10 minutes down the road. Yes, thank you. Yeah, 15 people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's very true. And I think complexity is part of what you're always aiming for as a filmmaker. Like, you do want to have sort of like the layers of an onion, so someone can enter the film and its themes from whatever theme speaks to them. I think if you have a one-note film, it doesn't really resonate as much. So the aim was very much, and I'm so glad that you got it, David, but there's so many different layers to the film.
Tell me a bit more about your dad. Was this really a film about your dad? I mean, I almost, one of the thoughts I had driving to a meeting this morning, was a very early meeting in Toronto this morning, was, is this a love letter to your dad? Was it, was this a way for you to have a conversation with him that you haven't been able to have up until this point? Because you do say early on in the film that your dad's pretty hard to get to know.
You know what? It is those things. I think that I was thinking very much about the fact that my dad is not very much an open book to us. He's very closed, and you have to ask him questions for him to divulge information to you. And I think that comes out of a lot of things, including the fact that, he went through a pretty bad war.
Right.
But at the same time, the film was also a way for me to have more patience with him. I was thinking about how it's when you're behind the camera, you also have to ask questions and you have to observe and you have to be more patient. And I think that when I'm with him without a camera present, I kind of revert back to the Aisha of 15, where I'm like, I think everything he does is weird. I think he's so eccentric. I don't have much patience. And then, you are like, okay, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to try to understand my father. I'm going to make this film. We're going to spend a couple of years together going on these trips. And I think that was also a way for me to get to know him. So, being and having the safe distance of being behind a camera. So
right.
It has changed things for us, which is nice.
So you're there as daughter, as storyteller, but also as filmmaker.
Exactly. And I think playing that dual role was very useful.
Yeah,
getting to know him better.
It probably allowed you to do some things that you wouldn't have been able to do, right?
Oh my God, and ask questions that I wouldn't ask out of nowhere.
By the way, the scene with you, I think it's you're in the car, and the conversation around the books, that he's written 4 books and you knew nothing of this.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
it's hysterical. I mean, I actually think we need to write a sitcom around your family. I think this would be a good idea. There could be
You know, I
there
talked to
there could be some money in this.
I talked to a TV producer at a party maybe about a week or two ago, and he said the exact same thing. He's like, "When you're finished with this documentary, circle back to me. We got to talk about this."
That's
It's kind of like
hilarious.
Schitt's Creek meets Little
Right.
Mosque on the Prairie.
Right. Right. Yeah, anyway, I just thought that was so funny because for me, here's your father writing these books for others and you don't even,
Hmm.
creating this history and this is what my past was like and the photos and so on and what life was like in Afghanistan back in the 70s, all stuff that you guys probably, are aware of, but he's writing it in detail for others and you don't even know he's done it. It's the irony is
Exactly.
just it's lovely, the irony.
Yeah, when I asked him, like, "Did you tell my mother?" And he's like, "Oh no, she's not interested."
She's not interested in these types of things.
Yeah.
So would you say, I mean, it's so interesting to me. Your family is it seems so honest and open. Some of the
Hmm.
conversations you had with your brothers and your sisters, I mean, again, really frank and your sister talking about, and can we talk about the memorial, by the way?
Yes, of
I mean,
course.
this is a pretty important part of the film, obviously, but it almost almost felt like it was a bit of an afterthought for your father. But
Hmm.
talking about the scandal of it, your sister talking about the scandal of this. I mean, you guys are really quite candid and honest with one another, and yet there seems to be something. Hmm. I don't know, like some kind of a block there. Is that fair to say? I mean, that's every family, right? I mean, it's just kind of maybe the way
Yeah,
humans kind of interact.
I think that you're right because I think in that same conversation, even though my sister said it's so scandalous and she's so outraged by this idea,
That's right.
she
Yeah.
also says, she also says, I don't really want to talk to him about it. So I think there's this block of like, we're a family that's pretty honest with each other, and I think we're able to live with conflict. Like, the conversations we had were pretty frank, but it didn't lead to like the disintegration of my family. But at the same time, there is some sort of boundary sometimes that we know this won't go anywhere with this person because I know they don't want to have a conversation about this. So they don't want to talk to my dad because it's actually kind of true. It's very difficult sometimes for him to hear things that he doesn't want to incorporate into the story that he has made up about something. So we've tried that before. So she says that pretty honestly, and I wanted to leave it in because that is my experience of my dad. And, my dad did see the film, and I have to say, I have to be honest that I think he found some of those parts, hearing us say that, a bit hard.
Oh,
But he
yeah.
didn't say take it out. He said, I'm so glad that you're being honest in this film.
Where did I mean the sense that he gives me is he's somebody that's pretty open.
Hmm.
I would have, if you had told me a little bit about him and I hadn't watched him on screen and so on, I would have said, oh, he's probably pretty conservative and coming out of an Afghani culture and from what I know of,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. But he seems pretty open to me. And
Yeah.
and 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 even to the point of, and maybe this was partially because the camera was on, but he really did seem to, once he heard your opinions, the family,
Hmm.
you know what, I get it. That's, that you're allowed to have that opinion. That's okay. But this is what I'm trying to do, and I want you to respect that as well, right? It seemed like I'm just kind of wondering where he got that sort of, your comment on this, but where he got that kind of balance from.
I don't know. Sometimes I think about that because when we moved to Canada, my parents were a bit more conservative. And, they have opened up over the years. And, we're a pretty modern family by every standard,
Right,
be
right.
it Canadian, be it Afghan. But, hmm, where does he get that from? I do think that my dad listens at some point, but he
Mm,
doesn't necessarily integrate your opinion.
right.
Like he will still go ahead and do what he wants to do, but he will let you have your opinion, which I quite like. So, and I also think that my parents were blessed with 5 kids with really strong opinions and
Right,
wills. So
right,
I think they
clearly.
have also learned from us.
Yeah,
So it's a
yeah.
two-way street. They
Yeah,
had to raise
no,
this many strong-willed children.
that's right. It's kind of it's all his fault, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, you learn from them, right? So.
so I mean, there were a couple laugh out loud moments for me, and I thought one of them and was when your father sort of admitted that he bought the pieces of land because of the
Hmm.
name and the history,
Hmm.
and then he said nothing else. And just the
Yes.
way he delivered it made me laugh out loud. and
Yeah.
as if this is a great gift. This is what's wrong with this?
Mm-hmm.
This is isn't this what other people do as well? And
Mm-hmm.
there's something quite lovely and quite charming about that, and yet also something about being, I don't know, just so rooted in the moment. No plan for the future here, and yet it's about your inheritance.
Yeah, I mean, that is the absurd part of the story that I found really charming as well when I first heard it. I was like, huh, I wonder like what made him do that. And it truly was the name more than anything
Right,
else. But
right.
then I thought it was so wonderful that you explore, well, what does this name bring up for you? Like what is so much,
Yes,
what is
yes.
in a name?
Well, yeah, and you and I'm not sure who made the comment, and I'm just kind of trying to remember how it was phrased, but something, and it was probably you, but something about this harmonizing the two stories. I think that was your father talking about
Hmm.
bringing sort of that Eastern culture meeting Western culture kind of a thing in the most unlikely of places.
Hmm.
But you said something to the effect of he must never feel like he's at home.
Hmm. That was my brother who said that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, really quite a profound moment for me because I think
Hmm.
over the years that has been a theme for me and on face to face and some of the conversations I've have had
Hmm.
with people. And I just kind of wonder if isn't that what we all want? We all want to feel
Hmm.
kind of at home. We want to feel comfortable with our families and our friends and the communities we work in and play in and we want to be ourselves, right? I mean, there's
Hmm.
something really wise about that. I think is do you think that's what it is? Is your dad's not quite comfy here?
I think that my dad has like a double, he has two sides to him. And I think that's what makes him also interesting to me is the fact that he is quite proud of being Canadian. He's the guy who'll put a Canadian flag on his jacket the day that
Right.
he has to go voting. And he will give us a speech about how important it is as Canadians to vote. But at the same time, I think that a really large part of him is always somehow in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And my dad left Afghanistan not because he wanted to, but because of the war. So I think that for him, that was a very violent rupture. And I think
Mm.
like it wasn't migration by choice, it was migration for survival. So I think that that's really an important part of understanding him. He's so happy to be here and he's very proud to be here. But at the same time, I think that a large part of him is still back in Afghanistan and always will be. He reads about Afghanistan nonstop. He talks about it nonstop. And, he writes about it as well. So I think that he's just sort of split between these two countries, and a large part of him is back home.
Well, it makes you wonder if and that's just the way it's going to be, right? I mean, this is an interesting
Yeah.
comment about history and memory for all of us, right? What is that line?
Mhm.
What is that? I left my heart in San Francisco, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And I
You
think about that for my siblings as well. And I think that in the end, I kind of was coming a bit to the conclusion that for us, our life is here. Like our worldview has been shaped by Canada, our experiences, and of course, being Afghan informs so much of how I experience the world. But at the same time, I feel deeply Canadian, to be honest, and whatever that may mean, because it has its own complications. But so I feel like it's a bit different for my dad, and has probably a lot to do with generational differences. And at the time that we came, I was still a child.
so what? So you've clearly had quite a bit of time now to reflect on the film after shooting
Hmm.
it and being a subject in it and editing it and so on. About to step into hot docs with this and Q&As and so on and other interviews. What are you thinking about it now that you weren't thinking about it before you started the project? I mean, there's a lot of questions and wrapped up in that one there. By the way, like
Hmm.
what have you learned about your family? I mean,
Hmm.
there's so much. What I love about life is there's so much more going on than meets the eye, right?
Right.
So you've got all this surface stuff, but what are we really talking about here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that I learned a lot about my family from not only taking the trips, but from editing the film, because you sit with the footage for 7, 8 hours a day for months on end. And I think we edited this film for 7 months or 8 months.
Wow.
And you're watching all of the footage, you're repeating and you're watching the same scenes. And I saw us argue, and I saw all of the outtakes, and I saw all of the interviews. And I thought so much about what role each person plays in the family. And it really made me rethink my own relationship to quite a few members of my family, and how I saw them without sitting down and actually observing them or asking them questions. So it changed what I think in that way. And I also think it deepened my relationship a little bit,
Mm.
with some members. it was really touching for me to hear my brother Nasser talk about what his family means to him.
Right.
You know, in the moment when he
Sure.
cries and he's
Sure.
talking about what his siblings mean and how much they help him. And, you know, I still think about that scene once in a while when I'm with him. And, you know, it makes me be a little bit more patient with him when he's, you know, having one of his moments, as he says. But I think I also learned so much more about myself,
Right.
you know, the things, how I react and, you know, what I think is my role in the family and how I really don't like some of the roles I play in the family and how I can kind of rescue myself out of that. Like, I mean, you go deep when you make films about your own family. And
Well, it's so true, and it almost makes me wonder. I'm just listening to you and smiling,
yeah,
thinking everyone should make a film about their about their own
yes, what a
family.
luxury to be able to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the revelations, right? The conversations you might not have had.
You know, and that's the part that's so important. And I also think about that because we're the only branch of my family in Canada. And my parents are both in the 60s. And you think if they were to pass away, there's so much of our family heritage and our stories go with them because we don't have aunts and uncles in this country and we're not in touch with them regularly. My parents are, we're not. So for me, it's also sort of a gift I give myself in the
Sure.
making of the film.
So just to sort of teasing that out a little bit, what is the film about for you?
Well, you know what? I actually think the film for me is about a lot of tensions.
Hmm.
So for me, I think about the fact that there's a generational tension in my family, that I think sometimes my parents come from a very different worldview, but they also come from a different generation. And I also think about the film is about this tension between the rural and the urban. Like this
Yes.
film challenged my ideas about what is Canada because I'm an urbanite. I was born
Sure.
in a city. I've only moved between the cities. I thought going there that there would be, you know, to be honest, like close-minded rural
Right.
Canadians who had never met Muslims before and they'd be freaked out about us.
Well, there's quite a
But it was,
few, by the way, there's quite a few lovely moments in the film where I thought it was going to go somewhere else, to my
yeah,
discredit, I suppose, right? Because I was being just as close-minded as some of those other folk might have been,
yeah,
and it didn't end up going there. And you guys were quite, I think, quite surprised too in some respects, and that's
yeah.
quite lovely, really.
Yeah, and also we wanted to sort of turn that lens around. You know, when
Sure.
you're Afghan and you meet people always ask you questions about your customs and about your traditions. And I was like, you know what? My family's going to go to the prairies and we're going to learn about Canadian traditions and Canadian customs. And it'll be like, that's the weird stuff that they do. And I thought it was so lovely that we actually took to some of these things. Like my mother fell in love with fishing. My brother really
Yes.
liked polka dancing. Like it was wonderful in
Yes.
that way.
Yes. Yes. I think was it your brother who was with the chemist? And he said,
Yes.
never in my life did I think I was going to meet a PhD chemist driving a combine or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm harvesting canola with a PhD in
that
chemistry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this is what I mean about the layers in film, right? I mean, because
Mhm.
we could riff on any of these. It's about being closed-minded. It's our racist tendencies. It's our
Mhm.
stereotypes that we come to the table with, the lens, the unconscious bias. There's so many things.
Mhm.
I mean, I yeah, I think it's there. As I said, there's just so much more going on. It seems to me than meets the eye.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments, and again,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but I've forgotten. I think it was you. Your father was
Yeah.
talking about you were being introduced to the Hutterite family,
Mhm.
and somebody said, "Oh, here we go. Dad's relating your Hutterite
Mhm.
culture to life back in Afghanistan." And
Yeah.
I just thought that was wonderful and comical all at the same time. But isn't that what we all do? I mean, we all have our own perspective and our place,
Mhm.
and I think it's quite lovely. This his phrase, harmonizing the two stories.
Mhm. It's true. I mean, it is wonderful, but in a sense, what I think that was me saying that in the film, and I think in that moment I was having a little bit of like it was grinding on me the fact that we were in Saskatchewan and I wanted to learn about where we
Mm,
were, but my dad was using and projecting
that's
Kandahar,
right.
Afghanistan onto
Yes.
everything, and it was like, Dad, can't we just be here? Can't we just learn from these
Mm,
people as who they are, not as them being a reflection surface for us? So,
nice.
you know, that was the daughter coming out, not the filmmaker.
Sure, sure. No, no, and it's a funny moment and a wonderful moment. Well, I think too, Aisha, for me, your film is about being present.
Mhm.
It's about listening, and it's about why, like, why would anyone want to go to Kandahar and build a cottage in Kandahar, Saskatchewan, and spend more than a few days there, right? Well,
Mhm.
maybe to meditate, maybe to be present, maybe to enjoy the view, maybe to think and reflect. I mean, there's right there's and
Yeah.
we so often, and I'm the light is all shining at me here now.
Yeah.
I have a tough time being present, right? It's
Yeah.
and with our with my family, with my wife Elizabeth and my friends, and
Mhm.
it's always about the next thing.
Mhm.
It seems to me that Kandahar, Saskatchewan's all about what's going on right now, right in front of us.
You're right, because I also was thinking about this when I was going to be shooting in the prairies, and I wanted to make a film that would look good on the big screen as well. And I was thinking, oh my God, the prairies are just this big, vast, empty land. And I was panicking, and I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, no, actually, there's so much when you look at the beauty of the little. And if you
Hmm.
just slow down and you look at the sunset and you look at this blade of grass, and we try to incorporate that idea of being present with sort of the landscape of the prairies as well, and be like, it may look like nothing's happening, but there's a lot. There's the beauty of this, dilapidated cottage in the middle of a snowfield. And so I think that was important to slow down as well and to be like, well, look around the area and just see it.
Are you guys closer together as a result of this experience?
Um, are we closer together? You want a very honest answer?
That's a hard question for you to answer based on the fact that this is now a public
No,
interview. I
no,
get
no,
that.
I'm totally okay answering it. I think that for me, some things have changed and have shifted a bit. I think that my brother Nasser had definitely a very eye-opening moment, and I think he's carried that with him.
Hmm.
He's been a lot more in touch, I have to say. But for a couple of family members, I don't think so. Like I think my brother Shakir, who's in the film, but very intentionally tried not to be too involved and really was keeping his own sort of space at moments. I think for him it was wonderful to be there, but it wasn't necessarily a changing, experience. Whereas I have to say for me, yes, for sure, as a filmmaker, as someone who lived with the story for 5 years and who really spent a lot of time thinking about my family dynamics, a lot of things have changed.
Was it hard to convince? I'm not sure exactly how you got the film funded and so on, but did you
Mm-hmm.
have a tough time bringing others on board?
I had to do a bit of searching to find a producer that had experience because I'm a first-time documentary feature filmmaker. I needed someone who had experience and who would really understand the story. So when Deborah and I teamed up after that, it was actually pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of waiting involved, but I
Right.
won a documentary pitch at the Montreal Documentary Festival,
Okay.
and that really set things off. So after that, it was like a lot of like getting in touch, meeting, waiting for answers. So in a very very unique experience. I have to say it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be.
Well, that's. I mean, that's got to buoy the spirits of a lot of first-time filmmakers out there, young budding filmmakers.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think you have to be very committed and you have to
Mm.
really know that you're going to live with this for a long time. And you kind of have to know you have a good story.
It's interesting. It just made me think: how many unfinished documentaries do you think there are out there?
I actually think that there are probably, I would venture to guess that maybe 60-70% of projects that people start don't get finished.
Don't get finished. Yeah, just the way you said, you got to be committed and you got to live with the story for a long time.
It's so true. I mean, I work at Hot Dog, so I've been kind of trying to keep a little bit of a mental tap of how long it takes people to make their films.
Right.
And I have to say, on average, it is very normal to do anywhere between 4 to 7 years.
Is that right, eh? Wow.
Yeah. And one year, a couple of years ago, we had two films that were the top two audience choice. It was Angry Anouk and also the film The Apology. And both of those films took 10 years to make.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty serious commitment. I mean, that's like sticking with a counselor for like your
Yeah.
therapist, right? For
Yeah. Or it's like writing your dissertation for a PhD,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What about you and your dad? I mean, I thought, I mean, the scenes of you in the car and talking about the book,
Mhm.
and then him being willing to read it to you in Farsi, I believe, because you don't read anyway. It's just I thought that was pretty delightful stuff.
Mm-hmm. What about my dad and I in the sense of has our relationship changed?
Yeah, like is there going to be a part two? Like, will you fast forward to, I don't know, some holiday down the road where you're going to show them all the stuff that didn't make it into the film, and
Uh, I wonder if they'd even want to see that.
Yeah, maybe not.
I mean, I'd be willing to show them because I've seen it so many times. But truly, sometimes watching the outtakes of films are not the most interesting things. The intention when you edit a film is to put all the interesting stuff in the film and shape it.
Right.
But when you literally watch 3 hours of footage of people fishing, it's really not that interesting.
Right. That's probably true. Yeah. Well, that's the gift. That's the gift of the editor, right?
Exactly. And that's the gift of the magic of the movie.
So let's talk, just as we sadly have to wrap it up here, but about the memorial. I mean, it's a fascinating thing for your father and for your family, clearly, to go through. But I think this is one of those stories that I mean, you as a family, I hope you guys reflect back on it, and there are other moments down the road where, oh, okay, now I get it, right? And again, isn't that what great art is all about? It's about those moments where you connect the dots after the fact, and it becomes a part of your story as well. So all that to say, this idea of wanting to more, the scandal, as your sister says, of the family. So your father's so committed to this idea of honoring kind of two cultures, honoring the other almost in a way that's frankly it's a bit unsettling, right? Clearly unsettling for your family, but I think also culturally is kind of flying in the face of what the norm might be, and I find that really fascinating.
And I think that's the part that fascinated people in my own family, thinking that here's this Afghan man who's a refugee from war himself, and he wants to honor Canadian soldiers who fought in Afghanistan. And like my father has a way of reframing the war, the war that started in 2001, the invasion, as sort of like a rescue mission, whereas the rest of us see it as an invasion. So it is kind of like interesting semantics, and it's really, for us, we see it so differently. And I wanted to explore that in the film and not shy away from that either, that there is sort of a heavy political aspect to the film and the relationship between Canada and Afghanistan.
There absolutely is. And I mean, you touch on the indigenous question as well. And I loved the notion of too, and I think this is deeply connected to all of this, but your father arrived, this is your narration, I believe, arrived a refugee and became a proud Canadian citizen.
Right.
And there's something, this isn't about nationalism. This isn't about any, I don't think this is about a sense of pride in this, man who's this very funny man who's built a family,
I think that my dad is eternally grateful to Canada for feeling safe here. And I think that for a man who didn't feel safe for a long time, like that counts for a lot,
It's pretty profound, it seems to me. So well, listen, I've had a blast chatting with you about Kandahr Away. Tell us about it's coming to Hot Docs May the 1st, 6:30 at the Lightbox, but I understand that show's already sold out.
Our opening night is sold out, which is wonderful, but it is playing 2 more times. It's playing Thursday at 1 o'clock at the Isabel Beta, and it's playing Saturday, May 4th at 10:15 at Tisdale Lightbox 2. So there's still lots of tickets for those 2 screenings.
What do you think is going to be the most asked question at the Q&As?
You know what? I have a feeling that people are going to ask my mom. My mom has poker face throughout the whole film. I think people are going to ask her, so what do you think of the film?
Yes, that's pretty funny. So are you hoping to all be on stage?
Yes, my whole family's coming to the first screening, and of course most of them are coming to the other 2, but they'll be coming up on stage.
Oh, that's so great. Well, listen, what a pleasure chatting with you. We've been talking to Aisha Jamal about her new film, Kandahr Away, coming soon to a theater near you. More importantly, coming to Hot Docs here in Toronto. Make sure you check out the website for more information about tickets. Aisha, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, David, for the chat.